Welcome to .NET training sessions. In this session, I am going to talk about the MS .NET introduction. I would like to divide the complete session in two parts. The first part, I would like to give introduction to all the object-oriented programming system concepts, where I would like to talk about what is an object, what is a class, what is abstraction, what is encapsulation, polymorphism, inheritance. Now all these concepts I am going to explain you in more realistic manner, not too technically, because it's a beginning. Once we understand the object-oriented programming system in more realistic manner, I would like to talk about why Microsoft need to develop the .NET framework. Then we move on to define what is exactly MS .NET. So let's understand the first part, object orientation programming system concepts. Now, if I would ask any person to list object-oriented programming languages, the foremost I get answers like C++, Java, and few people might say C#, .NET. Now, if again I ask a question, what is the first object-oriented programming language? Now people say C++, few may say Java, but for the information, the first object-oriented programming language is by the name Smalltalk. So Smalltalk is the first object-oriented programming language known to the world. Now after that, many programming languages came like C++, Java, now C#, .NET. So we have lot of object-oriented programming languages, but very few are famous. So one of them is C#, .NET. So now what makes special about object orientation? See, when I talk about a programming language like C, it's a purely logical or we say structured programming language. But when I talk about C++ or Java or C# .NET, we say it is object oriented. So what makes it special? We need to understand. So people say there are few concepts under object-oriented programming system. So OOPS stands for Object Orientation Programming System. Now under this there are concepts like object, class, data abstraction, data encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism. So now I would like to explain you all these concepts in more realistic manner. I'm not going to dig more technical today because it's just a beginning. We're going to cover a lot more in technical in the later sessions. So let's understand them more realistic. I mean to say, I would like to make you feel, or I would like you to visualize all these concepts in a real world manner. So let's understand one by one. So what is an object? Technically, when I try to give the definition of an object, or you try to Google the meaning of an object, we get generally run time instance of a class, or we get run time entity of a class. But people can't understand. See, when I talk about runtime, there is something called compile time. And what is again an instance? And what is a class when I'm talking about an object? So a lot of confusion. So we're going to understand all this when we go more technical. So what is our focus now? Our focus is to visualize this object. So to understand these concepts more functional rather than technical. So if someone asks me an object, I would say a pen is an object, a bird is an object, tiger is an object. Now if you see, I mentioned few living objects and few non-living objects. So to myself, an object is a real world element which is living or non-living. But what else you need to understand? An object holds two things. One, we call them as state, and the second thing is what? Behavior. Now how to understand this? So let us take an object. Now if I take an object and try to identify certain attributes, for example, I take a pen. So what a pen will have? Pen will have a name, it will have a price, it will have a color. Now these are the attributes that are associated with that particular object. That's a non-living object. If I take a living object, let's say parrot. So parrot is having a name, it is having a color, it will having certain height. So that is what I am talking about, properties or attributes associated with that particular object. And let us consider the second factor. What is the purpose of each object? Now we take a pen. What is the purpose of a pen? We draw, we can write, we can shade. What is the purpose of a bird? It can fly, it can eat, it can sing, let's say. So when I would like to define an object, object is a real world element that holds two important factors. One is the state, one is the behavior. So what is the state of an object? State of an object is what an object knows or owns by itself. Now why I am using knows and owns by itself? I am a living object. I have a brain. So I know my name, I know my height, I know my weight. But if I take a non-living object, it won't have a brain. It will have, or it will own a name, it will own a height, a weight, or a color. So that is what we talk about a state. When I talk about a behavior, behavior of an object is what an object can do or does, or simply the functionality of an object. So we have just understood an object. So in simple terms, object is a real world element which holds state and behavior. State of an object is what an object knows or owns by itself. And behavior of an object is what an object can do or does, or simply the functionality of an object. Now we have understood just an object. Now let us understand something about a class. Now again I would like to write the technical definition of a class that we Google and get. People say collection of objects is a class. Now I would not accept this definition completely. To my knowledge, collection of objects is never a class. Rather, collection of objects represent a class. I mean to say, now we need to debate on this. So we'll come back to this definition, whether it is collection of objects or a collection of objects represent a class. But before that, again, I would like you to visualize a class. See, we were able to visualize an object. Now I want to visualize a class. How does it look? So now let us understand that particular scenario. Now whenever I am talking about parrot, so I am referring or I am trying to talk about a bird. Now whenever I am talking about, say, India, I am trying to refer something by country. So what I understand, unless there is something called bird exists in this world, there is nothing like a parrot or a sparrow or an eagle will come into picture. In the same way, unless a country exists in this world, there is nothing like India or Pakistan coming into picture. So for a parrot to exist, bird is mandatory. India to exist, a country is mandatory. So I feel bird is a class which will have objects like parrot or sparrow. Country is a class which will have objects like India or Pakistan. So now let us understand and try to define what is a class. Of course, I am able to visualize a class now. So a class is a template or a skeleton, or people say blueprint, that is required to declare an object. So unless there is a class existing, there is no objects existing in this world. So object is always a type class. Parrot is a dash, it's a bird. India is a dash, it's a country. Now come back, I was talking about collection of objects represent a class. What I mean to say, like banana, apple, mango are the collection of objects that represent a class by name fruit. Parrot, comma, sparrow, comma, eagle are the collection of objects that represent a class bird. So we have understood very well what is an object, what is a class. Now we want to understand something called data abstraction. And when I talk about data abstraction, few people also talk about data encapsulation. Now some authors, they feel data abstraction and data encapsulation are two different concepts. But few authors feel whenever I am talking about data abstraction, indirectly I am talking about encapsulation. So before we understand them together, let us understand them individually. So what is data abstraction? Now when I talk about data abstraction, going back to the general technical definition, it says extracting relevant properties from an object and ignoring irrelevant properties from an object is what? A data abstraction. Again, it's too technical. Let us understand with an example. Let's assume there is a bus stand. Now in a bus stand, there are four people. One is a marketing manager. The second one is a car mechanic. The third one is a boy, and obviously there should be a girl. All the four people are observing a non-living object, car. Now when I talk about a marketing manager is trying to acquire or is trying to extract only those features which are related to marketing, like what is the brand, what is the demand of that object in the market, and is least bothered the other things like who's sitting inside or some other functionalities which doesn't match to marketing. Now beside to him is a car mechanic. So car mechanic is least bothered about the marketing features, but he's mostly bothered or mostly trying to acquire or extract the machinery part, the switches or the what we say gears and so on, which are related to mechanics. A boy and a girl might think something different. They would like to go for a long drive and come back. But what you feel is all the four people perception differs. They're trying to take something and ignore something. That is what we talk about data abstraction. Data abstraction means taking relevant things from the object and ignoring irrelevant things from an object. For example, I want to increase the volume in a television. So I'm least bothered what is inside the TV. What I am bothering is what is given to me and how to operate it. That is called data abstracting. It's hiding something which is not required to you is what basically data abstraction. So something like what is exposed is data abstraction. How it is happening is not exposed to you. For example, from the programming of C language, if you take, I know how to print a statement. Means to print a statement, what is required? Printf. So what is exposed, but how internally printf works, we don't know. That is what you need to be very clear about data abstraction. So data abstraction is more of what is exposed to the customer. Now data encapsulation. So when I talk about data encapsulation, we talk about something called a technical definition. If I talk about encapsulation, it's binding the state and behavior in a class. So actually data abstraction is talking about what and encapsulation is talking about how. See, I'm saying what is exposed to you, but how it is working is not exposed. So how I'm hiding that? That is through encapsulation. So I'm trying to implement abstraction using encapsulation. So when I talk about encapsulation, binding the state and behavior as a single unit called by a class and access the members through the objects is what together abstraction encapsulation. So as of now we have understood what is an object, what is a class, what is data abstraction, what is data encapsulation. Now let us understand something called polymorphism. Technically, polymorphism is multiple forms with common functionality. People say multiple forms or different forms with common functionality. Now what is again single form, multiple functionality, or multiple forms with single functionality? We can have lot of probabilities. So let us understand now like what exactly this is about. So first of all, I'm talking about an example all rounder. So now I am a faculty. So when I'm saying a faculty, what is my functionality? Teaching is my functionality. Now I say I am also a singer. So as a singer, what is my functionality? Singing. So if you observe over here, my form is changing from a faculty object to a singer object. And also my functionality is changing from teaching to singing. In this example, it is multiple forms with multiple functionalities. It is not polymorphism. Polymorphism means form can change, but functionality should remain same. For example, I am a C faculty. I teach C language. I am also a Java faculty. I teach Java. So what is happening? My form is changing from a faculty object to a singer object. But what remains common? The teaching functionality remains common. What I teach, how I teach, I am least bothered. am I teaching is most concern. Now I have a geometrical figure object which might take multiple forms like a triangle, a circle, a parallelogram. But as a geometrical figure, the functionalities like area or the perimeter will exist the same. But yes, area of a parallelogram is different. Area of a square is different. That's what I'm saying. How you do it is different. But am I doing that same will be the question. So polymorphism means multiple forms with common functionality. But more technical we are going to understand in a very later sessions. But as of now, as I'm promising, we need to understand them in a more realistic manner. So we have understood polymorphism. Now let us understand the last concept, inheritance. See, whenever I talk about inheritance, there are two things, reusability and extensibility. Now let us take an example. Now I'm a manufacturer company. Now I have two vehicles. One is a Hero Honda regular and I have a Hero Honda Splendor plus, let us say. Now something which is good in the past, is again repeated in the next generation. Now a self-start functionality is just added in the new generation. That is a reusability which is taken and extensibility been added. You have a basic calculator which provides functionality like plus, minus, into, division. Now I would like to extend that with a scientific calculator. So when I'm trying to take a scientific calculator, definitely I would like to utilize the existing plus, minus, into, division functionality, reuse it. And over that I would like to add additional functionality like natural logarithm. That is the extensibility part. Now you have a Windows operating system 95 very long back. Now we have Windows 10, the latest operating system. So definitely some parts you find repeatedly like notepad, calculator or a paint with some new options. So definitely when someone is doing something new, if you find something good in the past, definitely would like to reuse it. That is where the inheritance will come into picture. So now if you see the session what we had gone through, I focused more on understanding object-oriented programming concepts, but in a more realistic manner. My intention was to make you visualize, because in my past experience of my 15 years and myself as a student under a teacher, I found some difficulty of taking the definitions like runtime instance of a class, collection of objects, multiple forms with common functionality. It made sense, but it is too much technical to understand. So I didn't want to face them a lot. Then I understood more realistic. So I take all the examples to make you understand more realistic. If you understand a concept with an example, it will be a best learning. So now, anyways, we have understood about object-oriented programming concepts in a more realistic manner. We are going to cover them in more detail in the later sessions, well digging technical. Okay, but one more thing, whenever I'm talking about object-oriented programming systems, there is something called object-based programming. So what is the difference between an object-based programming and object-oriented programming? We need to understand. At a high level, we say object-oriented programming minus inheritance is your object-based programming. It's very simple to give a definition. Like from the OOPS concepts, you eliminate inheritance, we land up with object-based programming. So the best examples of object-based programming, if I would like to list, is Visual Basic. is object-based programming language. JavaScript is object-based. Not Java. Java is object-oriented, but JavaScript is object-based. Visual Basic is object-based, but Visual Basic .NET is object orientation. So how to understand this? We say that if object-based is very similar like object orientation programming, but this lacks only inheritance. Now let us understand with an example. Now let us say I have a requirement. Now I have written a class by name, let us say calculator. Now this class is having some functionalities like plus, minus, into, division. Let's say I have some ready-made functionalities. Now I give this task to create a scientific calculator to two different programmers. One, an object-oriented programmer. That could be a C++ or a Java programmer. And I give to another programmer object-based programmer like Visual Basic or we say JavaScript programmer. So what the object-oriented programmer will do? He includes inheritance. So he can reuse the existing code. So definitely he is not going to write any code again for plus, minus, into, division. He is going to write only the code for the new requirements like natural logarithm. But the poor situation is for object-based. Object-based can see the entire code from top to bottom, but he cannot use it. So from scratch, he need to rewrite the plus, minus, into, division and obviously the additional code also. So it's like a situation, a class teacher is giving you a cheat to copy in the exam. You can see the cheat, but pity on you, you cannot copy and write it in your exam. That is a worst scenario of object-based programming language. And your for information, the complete MS Office that we are using, MS Office old versions 97, 2000 up to 2003, it is developed using Visual Basic language only. And the latest versions like 2007, 2010 and the existing versions are developed in VB.NET. So remember, VB is object-based, VB.NET is object-oriented. Okay, we'll talk about this all later. So we end with the first part of this session. So in the first part of the session, we have just understood the OOPS concepts in a more realistic manner, and also we have understood about object-based programming. So let's move on to the next part of the same session to understand why and what is MS.NET. So let us understand with some diagrams. So now I would like to represent the next few steps with this slide. So now this session and the following session will just concentrate on why MS.NET, what is MS.NET. And in another session, we're going to talk about how MS.NET works and what is the prerequisite to understand them, and further things we'll understand. Now let us understand or try to know why Microsoft need to develop .NET. So I'm always try to make understand any concept in two ways. First, I would like to focus on realistic example, and I try to map that realistic example with a technical example. So our focus is now in this part of session only two questions. Why Microsoft need to develop .NET? And the second question to be answered, what is MS.NET? So let us understand now why Microsoft need to develop .NET framework and give it to the world. So let us understand this. So there are majorly many reasons to be known. So let us understand the first way. So now to understand why Microsoft need to develop .NET, we need to understand few general concepts, specificness and genericness. Now I move on to a colony. Now in my colony I find two types of constructions. One is an independent house, one is an apartment. So now whenever I try to find the difference between them, so when I see an independent house, so what I find, I feel okay, one single family is staying. In an apartment, definitely more than a family stay. I'm least bothered how many people are staying. I'm trying to focus on the resources that are consumed by them. So if I look into an independent house, the resources like a glass, a dining table, a television, a rich family would have a swimming pool or might have a gym. Every resource, small to a big resource, it is confined to or it is specific to only one single family. But when I talk about an apartment, I find two types of resources. One is a specific resource, one is a generic resource. For example, the television or the glass or the dining table are specific resources. But whereas the amenities that I count, like a swimming pool or a children's park or a gym, is shared by all families. That is generic. So I belong to a middle class family and I would like to avail all the amenities. Then since I cannot invest high amount of memory in the independent house, so I would like to go for a generic architecture, that is an apartment. If you see here, something which is generic, something which is shareable is being absorbed better than a specific one. Now from the colony, I move on to my college. In my college, I find a centralized college library. But generally, I never find CSC library, IT library, EC library, unless it is a very big university. So what is a better choice is always a centralized college library where I keep books of various departments so that any student would come, select a particular department book, refer it and put it back. So this is a better architecture when compared to the specific one. Now it's a weekend time. I would like to do shopping. So what is the first option? To buy vegetables, I need to go to a market and come back. If I want to buy some trousers, I need to go some shops and come back. So what is happening in the first option? I need to go specifically to each different locations and come back. It might take different time as they may be far to each other. But if I had a supermarket or a big bazaar where everything is placed at one place, it makes comfort for the customer to go and utilize it. So if you see on all the three examples what I was talking about, something which is shareable, something which is more generic is much in use or preferred for use. But now why I am talking this, how it is connected to why Microsoft .NET, we need to understand. So I am going to map the same technically this example in a better way. Now see. Now, so the first point of focus of Microsoft was to make a software which is language independent, or we say interoperably. So let us understand the first concept. So why we are talking about why Microsoft .NET, under which we are trying to understand the first target. Microsoft wanted to develop a software which is interoperable, or we say language independent. I'm not talking about platform independent now. We're going to talk, but the first concept means first thing why Microsoft wanted to develop a software, Microsoft .NET, was to make a software which is interoperable or language independent. Now let us understand. Now let us say I want to write an application which will print just hello world on my screen. Now I give this task to three different programmers, a C programmer, a C++ programmer and a Java programmer. So what is going to use? Now the C programmer is going to include a library called stdio.h, which is specific to C language. C++ fellow might use #include iostream.h, a different library. Java fellow might use a different package called java.lang. Now this is a library and he might use printf function, he might use cout function, he might use system.out.print. So what you observe here is all the three people are having a common goal, that is printing hello world on the screen. But what is the problem? Before the .NET coming into picture, all were experts in using their specific libraries. First point. Second point, every programming language definitely have some pros and cons. So what Microsoft felt, why can't we have a set of programming languages? Fine, but all should consume a common library. Why can't we have something called x.h header file, assuming x.h is a common header file which will be consumed by all programming languages? Why can't we have only one generic function called print that can be consumed by all programming languages? So Microsoft wanted to prepare a nice vegetable biryani by collecting perfect vegetables from the market. As we know, every programming language is having certain pros and cons, and he wants to take all the pros and want to write a code. That was the main intention of the Microsoft. But is it possible? At present situation, it's not possible. Why? Because he is not the owner of every programming language in this world. C, C++, Java vendors are different. So he definitely don't have any copyrights to do some manipulation in their libraries. So Microsoft felt that I need to do something for this. So what Microsoft did, since he cannot change the manipulation of all the existing programming languages, he started developing a family of .NET languages. So he thoroughly followed C, C++ and Java. So if you see, all these three programming languages have a same kind of culture somewhere or the other. So he understanding all the cultures, he made a language called C#.NET. Why he made that way is, if someone is coming from C, C++, Java background, he can easily adapt C#.NET and is trying to take good quality of features from those programming languages and placing at one place C#.NET. He found many web developers in the market. The Microsoft himself had ASP programming to develop web applications. Java people had JSP. Open source people had PHP. So to understanding those features, he came up with something called ASP.NET. Like this, he created a lot of programming languages. So as on today, Microsoft is having a family of support 60 different languages. But all the 60 are not built by Microsoft. Only 8 programming languages are developed by Microsoft. Remaining 52 are third-party partitions. I mean to say, for example, you have a COBOL language, a mainframe language, which is independently a success. Now he introduced something called COBOL.NET as an extension with Microsoft. So it is a partial understanding of Microsoft. So like this, many languages are there. So as on today, Microsoft supports 60 different languages under the tree, but only 8 are developed by Microsoft and remaining 52 are developed by third-party vendors. Okay, so this concept of taking some features from one language and moving into the second language, or trying to develop a solution partially with one language, partially with another language, this kind of interoperability feature is called language independence. So the first goal of Microsoft to develop Microsoft .NET is to make a software which is interoperable, or we say language independent. Now this particular feature is a plus for Microsoft .NET, but whereas this feature is a minus for Java developers, because in Java there is only one language support through which I can create a large number of applications of different domains. But in .NET we have multiple languages to create multiple applications of multiple domains. Anyways, but at a high level, both have equal respect in the market. Okay, so we have understood the first feature, that is making a software which is interoperable. The second requirement of Microsoft was to make a software now platform independent. Now we'll understand few things. First of all, we need to understand what is a platform. Then we understand what is a platform independent application. Then we try to answer like, is Java completely platform independent? Is .NET completely platform independent? So let us understand, first of all, we'll try to define what is a platform. Now in real world, if I see some platforms, the platforms are like a railway platform, a bus platform, and various kinds of platform where we stand and wait for some people. But in IT world, what are the platforms we have? In the IT world, we have at a high level two types of platforms. We call a hardware platform or a software platform. So if I talk about a hardware platform, we have a simple desktop, we have a laptop, we have a palm top, we have some handles or smart devices. All those come under hardwares. That is a hardware platform, and each device might come with different processors, different configurations. Now when I talk about a software platform, the software platform itself can be of two types. One is a system software, we say, that is an operating system. And next one is an application software. Application software which floats over operating system. So how to understand these two types of platforms? Now let us say I bought a new laptop and I am the customer. Now laptop is an independent entity. I am an independent entity. Now I need to communicate. So the laptop or the machine needs something to communicate with the customer. So it needs an interface, and that interface is your operating system, or we say system software. So I have a laptop, I installed Windows operating system, I installed Android operating system, I installed Mac operating system. So I need to install one operating system which will bridge the customer. So I'm going to use my laptop. So that is an operating system. Once I install the operating system, I try to install some games. I would like to install some Java software. I would like to install some Paint software. So those are the application softwares. So now we got an idea what is a platform and what are the kinds of platforms that are supported. Now that is fine. Now let us understand what is next a platform independent application. Now let's say I have a small company. Now I am good at developing video games. Now what is my challenge? Now I want to develop a software, or I would like to develop a game which should resist in every kind of hardware. So I am developing a game, I give to a customer using a laptop with a Windows operating system, or a laptop with Mac operating system, or a mobile with Android operating system. So my target is what? I want to develop an application which is independent to a hardware platform as well as software platform. Otherwise, you are not success in the market. So that is where a platform independent application will come. So I want to develop an application. I need a support from the programming language to develop a platform independent application. So a platform independent application is an application which will run or which would resist any kind of hardware with a different type of configurations which is running over a operating system. That is what we call a platform independent application. Now let us understand, is Java platform independent? The answer is yes, absolutely yes. Now the question is why? Now you need to understand two things. Whenever I am talking about Java, there is something called JVM, the Java Virtual Machine. Now you have to remember one thing. Java Virtual Machine is specific to an operating system. Java is a framework or a library which is generic to any operating system. Means what? Now I take a Java software, I install in a laptop with Windows operating system. So what will happen? A JVM of Microsoft version is installed, or I would say Microsoft JVM is installed. I take the same Java software, I install in a laptop with a Mac operating system. Again JVM is installed, but this time an Apple version is installed. So what you find is JVM is a specific to an operating system, whereas Java is a library or a framework which remains generic throughout operating system. Since the Sun people are able to install JVM in any kind of hardware, any kind of operating system, it is platform independent. Now this story is not completely done with Microsoft. Now if someone asks, is .NET platform independent? 2 years back if someone had asked, then we always used to say that it is partial platform independent. But now if you ask, is .NET platform independent? Yes. Why? Because now .NET has introduced something called .NET Core. So Microsoft 2 years back released .NET Core. Before that, .NET was successful only in Windows operating system. As we have JVM for Java, we have something called CLR, Common Language Runtime. So what is happening over here is, prior to .NET Core, Microsoft was able to install CLR only in Windows operating system. If I talk about Apple or some other Linux operating systems, there was a version called Mono Lemon .NET. The Mono Lemon .NET was successful for few languages but not completely. So 2 years back, when I talk about before to 2017, Microsoft was only partial platform independent because it is successful over the Windows but failed in the remaining operating system to success. So, but as on today, with the advantage of .NET Core, Microsoft has become again now platform independent. So I can develop an application which will happily run on Windows, which can run on Linux and also on Mac as on today. That is the point. So Microsoft wanted to develop a software which is platform independent. It is also success as of now. Now we have understood only the two important points why Microsoft need to develop .NET. One is to make a software which is language independent, or we say interoperable. The second thing, is the language independence as well as platform independence. That's clear. Now the third requirement in the market was service. Now Microsoft wanted to give a software which supports web services. See, when I talk about web service, as on today, if I count web service, or we say WCF, or we say web API, whatever, we talking about something called a service. So in the early stage of .NET, like in the early 20s, Microsoft wanted to give a support for web service. Initially it started that way, and it is now moved on to, like, after web services WCF came, after that WCF REST came, over that web API, then web API 2 is now in picture. So now, so what is this all about? What is a service? How to understand this? Let us take an example. Remember, in this world there are two things which are important. Everything you consider, it will be either a product or a service. If you take anything, either it is a service or it will be a product. So now, how to understand this? We're going to understand more functionally this concept now. Technically, we're going to implement all this in a later sessions. So let's say you have a lot of money in your pocket. Now you decide to start a business. So approach 1, considering the product approach. So what I do, I want to start a company. So definitely what you do, you buy a house of your own, a big house, you'll buy it. Let's say you are investing some 1 crore to get your house, to start your business. So this one house is your own product. Now, after buying a house, you would like to give the infrastructure for your company. So when I talk about infrastructure, you might buy some computers or buy some laptops. Let's say you buy some 20 laptops, or let's say 100 laptops, each costing 50,000 rupees. Again, these 100 computers are your own products. Now, you would like to hire some employees. So on rolls, you take some employees. Let's say you took 100 employees and you're paying them some 10,000 per month. Again, remember, these 100 are your own employees, your own product. You started the business on, let's say, January 1st of a particular year, let's say 2019. Now, what is going to happen? Now, everything is happy, so you are going fine. Now, let's say after a few days, your laptop gets repaired. So what you do, you have a lot of money. So you will call a person to repair it. So what that fellow will do, he might take an advantage of you. Like what? He can make this laptop ready for repair for next time. So he can corrupt your laptop. That is the scenario 1. The second scenario is, today you are using certain configuration. Now Microsoft says, hey boss, now you need to upgrade your laptops because I'm going to release a new software in the market. So definitely you need to upgrade the laptops. So what you'll do, you will buy new laptops or you'll throw away these laptops. That is the second scenario. That is still manageable. Now what happens, your business is down. You need to give a lot of debts. So what you do, you will try to sell everything. I mean, you take a house for 1 crore, you might sell it for some 50 lakhs. You might have an infrastructure of 100 laptops which is individually costing 50,000. You might sell it for 10,000. And the employees might put a case on you, or you have to give some salaries to them. So this can happen in the case of a product architecture. If the same thing, if you had gone instead of a product, a service architecture, if you had opted a service architecture, instead of going house, you would have taken a rent as a service. I am giving my house for rent. So house for rent is a service. So you might have paid monthly, let us say some 20,000 you are paying, let us assume. It's a service, it's not your own product. Rent as a service. Now you didn't buy laptops. You can get laptop for rent. Again, it's a rent. Rent of laptops is a service. You might paying 1,500 per laptop or 2,000 per laptop. And instead of taking role employees, you can take a contract employees. Now contract employees is what? Anytime you can remove or anytime they can leave. It's a mutual understanding. So you have some contract employees. So let us take the first scenario. Suppose your laptop gets repaired. Who is going to give you the service? The rental fellow only will give the service. And do you have any option of losing or corrupting of your laptop? No, because it's his own laptop. Definitely he is not going to corrupt his own laptop. Second scenario is what? Now Microsoft says that I am increasing my configuration. So what you do? You just change your laptop with a new configuration. Instead of you paying 2000 rent, you might pay 2500. Fine, but it's okay. Now instead of taking a role employees, you can take a contract employees. So now if suppose your business is down, so what are you going to do? So there is nothing going to happen. It's a loosely coupled architecture. So you stop giving rent, you take back the advance. You stop giving rent for laptops, you take back the amount. Contract employees, you can say, boss, I'm not able to pay anymore, so you can look for a job. Simple. So that is where a product architecture and a service architecture comes into a picture. That is where the web service. So now a web service is something, a service which is ready to use. For example, technically, suppose I want to develop a website. Now in the website, I want to place a search engine. What is the first way? Taking yourself as a talented developer, you develop your own code. So you will develop your own search engine that should work like a Google. That is your own product architecture. Here it may not help you. But here if you take a service as architecture, so I pay some amount to Google to use his search engine. If you are lucky, if he gives free. If you are not giving, you have to pay it. That way we can use it. That is a web service. Now I would like to know how many countries are there in this world. Is it possible to know? As a single body you may not know, but there are certain bodies which they do research and get some information and pay to some company. So that company will provide a service, get all countries by, or get all countries of world, or say get all states by country. You pass a country, get all the states. So you have to trust a service, a very good service, which is providing some information. So that is where web service will come into picture. It's like a brokerage. You're not taking direct service, you're taking through a broker. That is where the web services come into picture. So these are the main features that made Microsoft to develop .NET software. But there are many other reasons to create the software that we will be dealing in the later sessions, which are more towards understanding technical aspects. But these were the main reasons which made Microsoft to think about .NET giving to the world. So we have understood why Microsoft need to develop a .NET software. So now let us understand what is MS .NET, the last part of this session. Now let us first of all abbreviate MS .NET. MS .NET stands for Microsoft Network Enabled Technology. Now what is this MS .NET? So I have two friends. Now those two friends go to two different institutes to learn some courses. The first person will ask, sir, do you teach Java language? The trainer or the counselor will say, hey, yeah, we definitely teach Java language. My other friend will go to another institute and he'll ask, hey, do you teach .NET? The counselor says, yes, we teach .NET 3, .NET 4, .NET 5. So why this person is not using language whereas Java fellow is using a language? So for information, Java is a language and framework itself, whereas .NET is never a language. .NET is just a framework. But yes, C#.NET is a language. VB.NET is a language. ASP.NET is a language. But remember, plain MS.NET when I talk, it's a framework only. What is framework? We're going to understand in another session. But as on today, our focus is to define or what is a .NET. So you Google the definition of a .NET, you get a lot of definitions too complex to define. So I want to put it in a simple way. A .NET is a framework. Microsoft .NET is a framework or a platform that targets a programmer to design, develop, deploy an application of his choice. Could be a console application, a window application, a web application, or any kind of application. That is where we need to define MS.NET. So at a glance, in this session, we have understood a lot of things. First, we understood OOPS concepts in real manner. Second, we just understood why Microsoft need to develop the .NET framework. Third, we just defined what is MS.NET. So in this session, we've just given a pre-introduction to .NET framework. Hope you liked my session.